I guess one thought of mine is I definitely want to go in and look at what's going on during the days, during the week, to see if we could work our investigators a little bit longer in the evening or rotate their shifts so they're on a weekend. We should have a supervisor on every day of the week, and nights and weekends. I just think the biggest thing to do is to look at the people we have and not think about what shift they want, but what shift we need to be covered, and find out where they're best suited. They're in a position right now, I don't know all of Terry's reasonings, and they're, for all I know, there's the reason they're not where they're at. But I guess that's one thing I'm going to look into, is moving some people around. Of course, you have to do that within the guidelines of the contract, but I think we need to remember that we work for the community, and it's our job to make sure that we control our budget as best we can without compromising the safety. Another thing with the jail is that there's going to come a time, I don't know when, but we're going to wind up with a new jail, I would guess, sometime in the future. I think an idea would be to split the jail and the dispatch. Of course, there's a lot of things to look into, and that's down the road. That's not going to happen this term, but I just think there's some issues, I think, with hiring people in the jail and dispatch. You've got to make sure that's what those people want to be, because if they're there for a short ride and moving on, we need to find a better hiring process to make sure that we're keeping these people for 10, 20 years and getting young people to reach retirement at our jail.
Actually, I don't believe at this point, with the money that they give us, there's any way that I can reduce my overtime for the sheriff's office. The county board thought there was, and in 2005 they decided to pay $40,000 to study the sheriff's office because they didn't really think I knew what I was doing. And that was their right, and they spent the $40,000. And they found out that basically we were doing pretty good with what we got. And for years they have underfunded overtime, underfunded it to almost $40,000 to $50,000 short, and then they would complain when I went over. Well, the study showed that we should start out our overtime at $110,000 a year just for the patrol. That's what they suggested. Last year, I believe it was in 2000, or this year was the first year we were able to get it up to $100,000. We're close to where it should be. And it's very difficult with the current contract where we're doing it now with the need for public service, the limited amount of patrol officers that we have already, the limited amount of people to call on when somebody calls in sick or has vacation, makes it very, very difficult to say we're going to just cut overtime. It's not going to happen. For one thing, you wouldn't want it to happen because you would only find one cop out there running 816 square miles. And I don't think you guys would want that. I think you'd want somebody at your door if you called. There's no, if somebody can think of a way for me to cut overtime, it's a two-edged sword. And some of the county board members even mentioned hiring people. Will that help you with the overtime? Well, in some sense it would, but really what it does is it drives overtime on the other end, because then you've still got 30-some days a day off. That person gets a year considering sick time. So just adding a bunch of people, first off, it's not going to happen. We don't have the money, nor do you. But adding people just does not arbitrarily cut overtime. I'll give you a perfect example. Serona homicide. That's cost us $10,000 in overtime. 10 grand, we're not done. We don't budget, the county board never has, never will, and I don't advocate they should budget for homicides or any other incident or tornado or anything of that nature. Overtime is generated by a need for public service, and that's the way we've always looked at it, and that's the way we will continue to look at it. And I would hope that the county board continues to fund it at the level they are. Because unfortunately, if they don't give me the money, I still got to get guys out there. I just can't not replace a shift.
Right now in the sheriff's department, the contract the deputies currently have with the sheriff's department, all shifts that need to be filled by deputies, their contract reads that the senior deputy gets first pick of the overtime shift down, and they fluctuate it. That's where a lot of the overtime is coming in the sheriff's department. Yes, as Terry mentioned, the homicide, they're expensive. You know, that type of overtime, I don't think the citizens are complaining about. That's something that needs to be done. But a majority of the overtime in the sheriff's department comes from deputies filling these shifts that need to be filled for overtime. That's the way the contract reads. If you try to violate that, they'll grieve that. There's some things you can try to work with the union on, but that's going to also cost the county money, because if these deputies, they're not going to give it up without money. So you could look at safety reasons, put a certain space of time in between the shifts before they can work another shift or come back to work. That's one idea I have. And people talk a lot about using limited term employment. Limited term employment's good. It helps. It saves money. But there's also the liability aspect. You got a person that has limited experience, not a lot of knowledge maybe of the area, so that also brings up the fact you could have a lawsuit down the road if they don't know what they're doing. So a lot of this goes back to trying to work with the deputies and see if they'd agree to something where there's a certain safety fact between shifts before they work another shift.
I agree with the sheriff. You cannot predict when you're going to have a major crime and you're going to have overtime. That is what's going to happen in law enforcement. There are some areas that we could look at. I believe that on a daily basis, there should be no overtime going through that office unless the sheriff or the chief deputy is made aware of that overtime on a daily basis. It should be approved by the sheriff or the chief deputy at the time that it's being done. If you have a certain person that continues to call in sick every Saturday night, I think we have a problem here. I'm not going to keep on paying overtime out to the same person that keeps on calling in sick. We need to look at why the overtime is being paid off. Is there anything we can do to avoid the overtime? Do we have an abuse going on here? I hope there's not an abuse. I think the limited term employee, I think, is a good outlet to reduce overtime. I think that's also, obviously, it's a union issue in the sheriff. I'm aware of what's going on with that. I know that the sheriff's department's hands are tied. I do believe there's some really, really good quality police officers in Washburn County that would be willing to work for the sheriff's department on a part-time basis, that would be willing to be put on the payroll if they were allowed to do so. I'm an example right now. I work part-time for the St. Croix Tribal Police. There's times when they have scheduling issues that come up at the last minute. They'll give me a call. They'll say, can you come in and work? We have a shift open tomorrow morning. If I'm available, I'll work it. If I'm not available, they're going to fill that shift at overtime. I agree with the sheriff. He's going to fill the shift. But we need to have some options out there. A limited term employee that's been through a field training program, that is a full-fledged police officer, full-time with another department, is a wonderful resource to bring into the sheriff's department and say, I've got a shift open. We got 5 people here that are available on a part-time basis. Let's get on the phone and start calling. If none of them are available, I guess we're going to have to pay out at overtime, or the chief deputy or the sheriff himself is going to have to cover a shift. I have no problem saying that. I think that's why we're in this business. We need to get out there and control and work the roads and control our budgets and work for the people. The people are what we're working for, and they should come first.